Hello, my name is Daniel Yuck. Thank you for watching today. I appreciate you, your time, and your support. In today's video, I want to share with you how we can go about printing shading within our thermal printers. By the end of this video, you will have a better understanding as to how shading works with thermal printers. Should you have any questions at all at any point throughout this video, I'm going to encourage you to drop a comment down below. I will do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. Please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and ring that bell for me, as I will be bringing more videos like this for you all. I do also have social medias under the same name as my YouTube channel. I have Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok, all under Daniel Yuck. I would appreciate the support over there as well. With that being said, let's get right on into this. One thing that I feel is important to note that the results are going to vary from thermal printer to thermal printer. Every thermal printer has a different DPI, which is basically the amount of pixels that a thermal printer is capable of printing. Now, some have more. The higher the DPI, the more detailed a design could get. The lower the DPI, the less amount of details that we are able to capture with that specific thermal printer. So again, the results may vary, but the same rule of thumb that I'm going to share with you here should translate over to most thermal printers. Now, you can see I have a floral rose design right here with an outline. These will be available in a stencil pack. More on that in another video, but for now, you'll see I have an outline. And then I have the same design here, but with shading. Taking a closer look here, you're gonna notice that this shading is made up of a series of what I would call pixels, individual dots all the way through. So the shading isn't necessarily clean or anything. However, I'm kind of mapping out where I want my darker points to be within this rose right here using a series of dots. You can see it's real rough right here in this area as well, all of that. Now, that's not the way that I would tattoo it when I'm applying these shadings. What I'm doing is I'm basically mapping out the areas of shading placement that I want for this specific rose using a series of dots. This is pretty much the exact same thing as stipple shading. The reason why I'm going with a stipple shading approach to map out my shading is because thermal printers do pick up on pixels. So even if this was just a line design, for example, if we zoom in all the way, you can see that this is essentially made up of pixels, and this is what's going to read within the thermal printer. So in theory, if we're adding pixels here in the form of shading like this, then we should get a gradual same sort of print going on, and at least at the very least enough print here to be able to help us map and navigate where we want the shadings to be. This is one version of the design, and you're gonna notice that I did do it in layers here. So if I go over here, you're gonna see that this is just shading on its own. Let's say if I wanted to do some trial and error, what I can do is I can simply duplicate the shading layer and darken up all of these areas, so that way I get a print going there. But you can see that this rose right here is tremendously darker than this one. So in theory, we should be able to capture all of these areas fine when it prints. This one I'm not too sure about, so you can kind of see we're trial and erroring different saturations here. This is something that you may need to do on your end to figure out where your printer best prints. A quick note, the only reason why I doubled up on the saturation is so that way I can see where my thermal printer best prints. Right here I have a Dragoart Bluetooth printer, and I have a sheet of Spirit stencil paper. And from here we're going to send these designs to the printer. So keep in mind that thermal printers print by the pixel here. And that's very important when applying the shading. That's why I applied the shading in pixel format, so that way in theory the thermal printer can pick it up. And you can see right here that it does in fact pick up the pixels that I applied there in Procreate. We're going to take a look at the different levels of saturation here as well in a moment. So here we have the final prints. Let's go ahead and take a look at these results. And of course, we can go ahead and size them differently should we choose to do so. So you can see that right here we have the outline, and then within these two we have different levels of saturation, and I do have my shading mapped out. I don't need it to be perfect, I just needed a guide for the entire design here. So I'm also going to use a reference as well as these shadings here, so that way I can map out the design shading placements. In some areas right here, a little bit more shading was captured, however the integrity of the shading placements is all there. This is the idea behind printing shading with a thermal printer. Although it's not perfect like the way it would would be, let's say, on an inkjet printer. If we are needing to shade, this is one way that we can go about mapping out our shading placements, or we can even use dotted lines and get rid of the saturation. If you don't like the saturation, there really is no right approach or wrong. I feel like it's whatever we're most comfortable with. I feel like it's important to mess around with different levels of saturation to see where your printer would best print. I do like this right here because these middle details aren't really lost the way they are right here, but however the saturation within this one's a lot more than this one, so you kind of have to weigh it out, check out different sizings as well, and see where your printer would fall best. But this is the idea behind printing shadings on a thermal printer. It makes it really easy. All these darker areas are where the shading is going to be, so to speak, and then we can just kind of follow the petal's direction and then shade in naturally there. We can use a round mag, we can use a round liner, we can use whatever we'd like to apply the shading. That's really neither here or there, but you get the idea. Also, the same method would be applied to any design. So if it's like, let's say, faces, if it's leaves, clouds, anything, we can go ahead and approach it with the same approach where we apply pixels within Procreate, like a sort of stipple shade there to act as the guides to print out. Kind of want to do a comparison here. You can see that I'm using my TOEC thermal printer to print these designs here. But I do think when it comes to thermal printers, if we need to map out our shading, I do feel that doing it in pixel format, adding dot by dot like stippling, is the best way to go about it. Now we can map it out with the shading and put the shading place where we would want to within the actual design, or we could just simply map out the shading with dots and lines. It really is up to the artist. I think, for example, with the TOEC, what I could do is go in Procreate and take the one layer down of shading, probably to around 75-50 opacity, and then reprint if I wasn't happy with this. You can see that there is a lot of detail right here lost within that print versus this one over here. However, it's not too bad. With the reference, we could definitely still map and navigate our way through, but that right there is the difference in DPIs here. So you can just see though that thermal printers will definitely vary within results. However, the points still get translated across. When it comes to the application process within the iPad, it's going to be very similar as to the same process if we were stippling a tattoo. Now, when I'm doing this, I'm simply finding the area that I'm going to map my shading out to, and then I'm just simply going to begin applying the shading as I would as if I'm stippling on fake or human skin. And I'm just going to work up the gradients until I'm happy with the levels that I reach. And the brush that I'm using is pressured as well, so the harder I press, the darker it's going to be. This allows me to gradually layer up the gradients the way that I want, and I can be real precise with where I want to place it because the pixels that I'm using are small, as you can see. Let me show you right here. So very small dots, and I'm just placing these over one another back and forth to get the shading that I am looking for. And then once I've mapped out all of the shading, I can then take this practice or this shading practice that I've done here into the tattoo. I do feel like mapping out the shading like this really does help me apply the shading when it comes down to the actual tattoo. If I'm going to use a round mag or a round liner, it really doesn't matter. The same kind of motions that I'm making here would still apply. I would still move mags and round liners in a very similar manner as I'm doing here. So you can just see though that I just simply layer up the layers exactly as I would in a tattoo. The real secret happens within Procreate and the brush that we use. We want to use a good dot brush to help us map out our shading placements. Thermal printers pick up on pixels, which is why I use dots to apply the shading here when I want to map out specific shadings for designs. If I use a smooth brush, thermal printers typically don't tend to pick up on smooth data. It picks up on pixel data, as I showed you here within these lines as well. So that's why I chose to go with a dot brush to put pixels and map my placements out here for the shading. I can go ahead and leave a link within the description of this video, so that way you can download the exact dot brush that I used here to map out these shadings. So that right there is the trick. I just simply map out my shading placements in pixel forms using a dot brush. That prints over well to a thermal printer, and this is good enough to guide me through the entire tattoo session. That is how I go about printing shading within my thermal printers. Should you have any questions at all, I'm going to encourage you to drop a comment down below, and I'm going to do my absolute best to assist you in the best possible direction. Please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and ring that bell for me, as I will be bringing more videos like this for you all. I do also have social medias under the same name as this YouTube channel. I have Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok, all under Daniel Yuck. I would appreciate the support over there as well. With that being said, I appreciate your time and I thank you for your support. You have a great day.